Hey there, ho there, folks. Welcome to Cannabis Talk, otherwise known as the Daily Nugget. I'm your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. It's 4 o'clock, and the entire Pacific Coast is getting ready for that 420 bowl in the afternoon. Alright, not the entire West Coast, but everybody who's into cannabis, right? Thank you for tuning in. And many thanks to the infamous Scott Joplin for that lovely piece of music. It's one of my most favorite pieces of music in American music history. This is that show, that Cannabis Talk Show. I'm your pro-cannabis spiritual guide, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Welcome. Today's episode is about the intersection of cannabis use and parenting. Thanks to my very first follower on Sprecher, a fellow podcaster whose name is totally escaping me right now. I'll have to go dig up that name so as to not be rude. But very many thanks to her for requesting this topic. Let me find my fellow podcaster slash followers. Here we go. On the Sprecher platform, the Snarky of Oz. She has 32 followers. She's my only follower. And she came up with this really brilliant suggestion after tuning in to an episode of Cannabis Talk last week, I think. For the record, I am not under the influence of any direct cannabis consumption today. Because I've been fighting off this cold, I needed a break. Over the weekend, I was kind of... There's medicinal purposes for cannabis, right, as we all know. And maybe the common cold may or may not be one of those medicinal purposes, but in my past, I've noticed that if I get a cold, or if I feel that onset of getting a cold, and I happen to have the day free, and I consume cannabis a little extra heavy that day, and then take the day off the next day, it does a world of difference. That and lots of fluids, lots of orange juice, and a bit of vitamin C. Not too much, because you don't want them kidney stones. But okay. So thanks to the Snarky of Oz, a fellow amateur podcaster here on the Sprecher platform, for suggesting today's subject, parenting and cannabis, the crossroads. Now, obviously, whether you smoke cannabis or not, you've probably heard some of the less than exciting news that has made it out from many of the states that have recreationally legalized cannabis, with some horror stories about kids getting into the brownies, or kids not realizing that these gummy bears were cannabis. And that's sort of like just the tip of the iceberg, folks. That's just plain old bad parenting that has got nothing to do with those parents consuming cannabis. All right? You wouldn't blame the gun itself when a kid gets into a gun that's been improperly stored and locked away, would you? No, you blame the parent for being short-sighted and irrational enough to assume that their kid knows better. Most kids don't. Not that I'm dismissing kids. Kids are awesome, amazing things, and we owe them the world. So, let's zoom back, though. What are my qualifications to talk about this? Well, first of all, I don't have any children. Not that I know of. Knock on wood. Hopefully I don't have any children that I don't know of. But so, that usually is a big turnoff to parents. But I'm not addressing everyday, ordinary parents that don't smoke cannabis, because y'all probably don't like the idea of kids and cannabis at all. You know, the two coexisting in the same family space. I'm here to speak to my fellow cannabis enthusiasts who may or may not quite yet have put a lot of thought into how they're going to cope with their relationship with cannabis when their relationship with their children, when the two get in each other's way. So, first things first, as I have with all my other segments today, I wanted to mark a special moment. Oh, it's actually a fib. Cannabis Talk has not yet been submitted to iTunes and Google Play. But if you're a Cannabis Talk listener and you haven't checked out my other podcasts, because I think of it all as one project. I just, like the news, I have different segments. If you haven't checked out the other segments, they are now available on iTunes and all of the podcast catchers that pull RSS feeds from iTunes, and Google Play Music. So check them out. And hooray for that. Okay, cool. Boom. Did that, covered that. Let me start by saying this. It is no one's place to dictate to a parent what they can and cannot do with their family. But as a member of the cannabis enthusiast tribe, I do think that we as a collective have a responsibility, a moral responsibility, to craft, promote, and build consensus around a cannabis culture that takes this and its subset of issues into account. No disrespect intended, but I have met cannabis enthusiasts, people who enjoy consuming cannabis either for medicinal purposes or for recreational purposes, because the two have coexisted simultaneously since long before any of this legal recognition has come into being. So there have been plenty of people who understood that cannabis cures and have been utilizing it for that purpose. And plenty of other people who enjoy it as one of the most safest recreational, quote-unquote, mind-altering substances out there. So I've been around to folks and have non-judgmentally observed plenty of people and discussed openly with people what their choices have been around kids. The urgent thing, though, obviously because of the news and because of the wave of acceptance at the societal level, is this issue with kids getting at it when they shouldn't. That's beneath us, folks. Please, 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 and I don't say this with anger in my heart, but please don't be that stoner that gives the rest of us a bad stoner image. Okay? Stoner is a pejorative term. We shouldn't, it's great that the culture has taken it on to itself, and that's great and all. Most people do that when an other group creates a pejorative term for the group you strongly identify with. Ultimately, that group, will take that negative word and turn it into a positive word for themselves. But I'm deeply concerned that the negative stigma of the stoner archetype, the stoner stereotype, will not only linger in our culture, but might flourish. Because all stereotypes, all archetypes have a nugget of truth to them. So the simple fact of the matter is, it's on us as parents. I'm not a parent, but I include myself in that grouping because I have worked with kids a lot, and I still, I have a sister who's almost 20 years my junior, and therefore, in my late teens, early 20s, I spent a lot of time co-parenting her with my mother and father as a sibling. I spent a lot of time babysitting my sister, and at that time I was not consuming cannabis, but I was aware of the culture and the general phenomena, and I had plenty of friends who had it. And even back then, when I was first, when you have to take on a child, the responsibility of raising a child, whether it's a blood relation like a sibling, or whether it's a neighbor's kid that you're babysitting, it gives you an opportunity to contemplate. If you're the kind of thoughtful person that is full of curiosity, you will contemplate, what kind of relationship do I want to have with any kids I might have in the future? So that question has been something that I learned back then to keep on the forefront of my mind, just so that I wouldn't be caught without a good, well thought out, plan about certain things. And one of those things that I have spent some time looking into is, of course, cannabis consumption and parenting. Because once I did become a cannabis enthusiast for its medicinal and its recreational purposes, I realized, wow, if I ever, meet the perfect cannabis gal and we fall madly in love, get married, and start a family, then we're going to have to decide what to do. And I've known a lot of folks that were like mixed couples. You know what I mean? One member of the couple was a cannabis enthusiast and the other was not. And then, boom, suddenly they find themselves with kids, and wham, there's all kinds of like, well, we didn't know, and we didn't really talk about it, and my expectations are this, and your expectations are that, and it just turns into a big clusterfuck. And let me tell you something. There's one thing that your kids, your present kids, or your future kids do not need in your life, in their lives. It's a clusterfuck about something as simple as this. Transparency, safety, and communication. What do I mean by transparency? When you make something taboo, the child's curiosity attaches itself to it. All right? And I'll give you a prime example. In high school, I knew lots of kids kids, mind you, we were kids. Lots of kids that were serious drinkers and had been for a time already. Why? I asked around, and it wasn't a very scientific survey, but to the best of my recollection, it seemed like the majority of those who had started drinking before high school did so because their parents drank and made it taboo. The kids saw the hypocrisy in that and said, well, fuck that. If my parents can do it, so can I. And no serious, well thought out discussion about the dangers and risks and the differences about consuming it under the age of 21 and over the age of 21, both philosophical and biological. Those discussions were never had. I think the same model probably applies to cannabis, my friends. Transparency. I don't see any reason why kids should be raised ignorant of the plant. It's a sacred plant, and it heals. And in many cases, it is healing children. Now, those children are not pot smokers. Those children are receiving CBD and THC infused oils or something like that, right? They're receiving some non-smokable concentrate in order to get at the most direct of the healing properties, especially some of the maladies that we see young kids that are treatable with cannabis. It's not about smoking it for them. And cannabis heals, but it heals in different modalities depending on how you relate to it. If you smoke it, it will heal or facilitate you with certain things. Anxiety, great one that works with smoking it. Insomnia, another one. Ding, ding, ding. By the way, it is 4:19 on the West Coast. Today's sober day. I don't have a bowl to smoke. And I haven't, I've had the thought, but I haven't put in the time to make the sound effect, so I can play that anyways when I'm not smoking. But I'm not smoking today. But if you are, cheers and spark up with safety. Don't smoke and then go driving, please, folks. Same kind of thing. As with, all these other safety concerns that we're expressing or exploring here. But as a friend of mine used to say, hey, it's 4:19. You got a minute? Cheers. Happy tea time of the soul. Okay, so. Transparency. Talk to your kid or kids. Let them know that it is a special part of your life. Don't hide it from them. Hiding it from them will only project a taboo message, which will either make them fear it, because that's the other thing I noticed. This was people whose parents drank openly in front of them, but then made drinking taboo. They feared it. It was another, the next most popular response. So you don't want your kid to fear cannabis, and you don't want your kid to be drawn to it at an inappropriate time because of the taboo. Instead, let's just talk about it. Isn't it weird and funny that here in Trumptopia, formerly known as America, more parents, a broader demographic of the country's population, is a bazillion times more comfortable owning guns, using guns, showing off guns to their kids, and in theory, supposedly teaching them about guns, than they are comfortable talking about drugs, alcohol, sex, cannabis, religion. Isn't that a little weird? I think it's a little weird, yo. But I'm going to save that for a Trumptopia episode. I keep alluding to this gun episode. It's not really an episode of any of these particular podcasts. I have a video project in mind. A simple, like a webinar. A meme ovid is, I think, one name I came up for it. Because I've made a lot of gun memes ever since becoming a meme farmer, a meme developer. That's silly sounding. That makes it sound more grandiose than it really deserves to be. But ever since I became attracted to the meme of art, I've been very keen on wanting to create a gun episode. But just stay tuned for that. It'll come down the pike. Probably be exclusive to YouTube because it's going to be slides and audio, not just me rambling. Okay. I digress. I think you see my point. I didn't mean to offend any gun owners. If you're a strong enough fan, you know that I've talked about this in other episodes. I'm not anti-gun, and I'm not pro-gun regulation. I'm anti-gun profiteering. That's a whole nother landslide for a whole nother rabbit hole. Okay. So, transparency, man. Just make it something that you can openly talk about with your kids. Answer their questions about it. Duh. Safety. That should be self-evident and obvious. Don't put the cannabis brownie in the cupboard next to other snack treats. This applies to adults as well, my friends. If you've ever had a roommate in your post-juvenile life, you know that sometimes it's easy to blur the boundaries between what is yours and what is mine between roommates. Now, for some of these things, it doesn't matter. Borrow each other's shoes or dresses, ladies, go ahead. But let me tell you something that sucks. When you, as a non-cannabis user, and I'm saying this empathetically and self-identifying because I've known this to happen to non-cannabis consumers that I'm friends with, and that this has also happened to me during a time when I was on vacation from cannabis. It's not fun to think you have discovered a neat treat, a candy bar, a snack, a brownie, the most common, because we used to make brownies long before the edibles industry existed. It's not that hard. Remind me, and I'll try to do a cooking with cannabis episode down the road. I should write that down, or else I'll never remember it. But anyways, there's nothing lamer than thinking you're getting a decent, straightforward, non-stoner treat non-stonifying treat, mind altering treat, and then you know it's super heavy laden, it's really high concentration, and you get crazier effect than you've ever had before in your life, and that's not fun. When you're expecting it, when you're braced for it, when you're prepared for it, when you don't have to go anywhere in the next 8 hours and you're planning on it, it's genius. You can have deep, powerful spiritual experiences on some really intense edible cannabis edibles. But when it catches you by surprise, it's annoying at best and kind of mindfucky at worst, and potentially dangerous. All right, especially now as state by state we're slowly adjusting our social acceptance. Let's not fuck it up for ourselves. We don't need more crazy stories about poor unfortunate souls that didn't know they were eating a bag full of cannabis gummy worms, who then got in their car because they were late to go pick up their kid and got into an accident or something dumb like that. We just don't need that, guys, and it's not that hard. The industry's got to step up a little bit with the clarity of packaging. I know that they've made leaps and bounds in that regard, so it's not like I'm unfairly accusing them. I'm just saying they got to stay on top of it, especially nowadays. We got cannabis water. Who wants to accidentally, drink cannabis water? Who would feel comfortable if their child of 3 accidentally drank way too much cannabis water? It'd be ridiculous. As with all things, healthy or unhealthy, moderation and safety are critical. You can hurt yourself with healthy things too, but that's a whole nother. So what did I say? Transparency, safety, and communication. While cannabis is 1,000% healthier than cigarettes, coffee, alcohol, and the list goes on. There's just a million things that it's healthier than. It's still something that you have to understand in order to have the best, most healthy relationship with it. And I've seen way too many people get into the habit of cannabis use, and they don't even really understand what opportunities they're being given by the plant and its effects. And then it becomes something that they themselves develop a negative relationship to, because they lump it in with all these other horrible behaviors or other horrible substances. So yeah, and if you're a cannabis parent, it's never too soon to start. And conversely, there's like going overboard the other direction, right? Because we got cannabis t-shirts and cannabis stuffed animals and all kinds of cannabis culture merchandising is coming out. And presumably, an endless amount more will be flooding the market. And while that's cute and all, if you just adorn your child thoughtlessly, don't do that. Don't fall for that pit trap. That's not healthy or appropriate either. You can't just, doll up your kid with cannabis products, imagery rather, and then not explain any of it. And that's one of the things that happens. It's really, really common here in America or Trumptopia. But it's a global phenomenon. It's human beings just absentmindedly assume that their kids will understand and follow suit according to whatever they decide is cool. It requires communication. And that's a two-way street, folks. 2 ways. That means they're going to ask you questions. Some of those questions are going to be challenging and difficult. You might not know the answer to some of those questions. I know cannabis enthusiasts, I myself think might be considered included, that can't remember which one's sativa and which one's indica. Not because we're idiots, but because it doesn't matter. Or in my case, pardon the coughing. In my case, I phenomenologically can't distinguish the two. If I smoke an indica, it feels like I'm communing with Sister Cannabis. That's what I call her in spiritual terms. If I smoke a sativa, I'm communing with Sister Cannabis. And rarely do I really, really notice, oh, wow, this one's going to knock me out and put me to sleep, and this one's going to make me want to run a marathon. And I get it and respect that to some people the difference in phenomena is that wide. But I digress. My point is communication. We have to communicate with each other and understand and establish cultural best practices. Some of them are just stupidly obvious. Don't smoke it in your car. Hell, don't just carry it around in your car. It's harmless as fuck to have a gram, half a nug in your car because you're going to your friends and you want to share some over there. But if it's not properly put away and it's not in a medically identified, like you use this for medical reasons, or even now, keep in mind the laws that we voted for don't take effect until next January. They're not in effect now. So we got 6 months where you can get busted really hard here in California. And in fact, I would not be surprised. Let me say it again. I would not be surprised if some elements of our police force are out there trying to capitalize on that window and catch people doing dumb things with cannabis in their cars before the new rules come into play. So, communication applies to oneself too. Know what the rules are, my friends. I can tell you all about the California legislation. That's not what this episode's about, but I could. But I don't know what's going on in Florida. I don't know what's going on in Vegas. The only thing I know about Vegas is what I saw in the news on Fox News. And by the way, Fox News, cannabis is not a stimulant. Cocaine is a stimulant. And the two are very different. Although cocaine, and people always go, well, cocaine's based on a plant whenever I, posit that there's good drugs and bad drugs, or that there's a difference, a dividing line between cannabis and a small collection of other plants that have these quote-unquote psychotropic effects, and other things that might resemble that, like cocaine comes from the cacao plant, or cocoa plant, or however you pronounce it. It comes from a plant. But cocaine itself is highly, highly, highly processed. Therefore, not the same. And should not be categorized the same as a plant that grew out of the ground that I picked without processing and then consumed. Okay. So we have to inform ourselves. We have to inform each other. We have to be smart and safe. And we have to be transparent. It's important. If you are a cannabis enthusiast and you are going to raise kids or are in the middle of raising kids, it's going to make a big difference if they understand that you're under the influence now and not under the influence then, or vice versa. If your kids can understand that, then they're not going to draw crazy, misguided, and completely irrational conclusions about what your relationship to cannabis is. And they're going to be able to have for themselves a healthier decision-making process about what their relationship with cannabis will be in the future. And it is really appropriate that there's an age limit. I know that cannabis is super popular and has always been a problem of popularity with youngsters, with adolescents, in part because it is a plant and it's relatively easier to get. And was in the past, back when all of it was illegal, than other more hardcore drugs. I don't want to go down the gateway drug rabbit hole. I think I already talked about that at length in some other episode. But I do want to talk about this right here. There's a really good reason why people should wait till a certain age. The human body does not stop its development process until your late 20s. So into your 25, 26, 27, your brain is still unfolding. And the brain sort of reaches this maximal development and then stays really fluid and adaptable during your mid-adult years, 20s to like early 40s. And then it starts to really get old and to. You ever notice we often complain about old people being stuck in their ways? Well, that's because for many people, for the vast majority of people, the brain starts and the body itself starts to harden at a cellular level. Arguably, there's some evidence that cannabinoids, being part of the cannabinoid system that's naturally occurring in the brain and body, facilitate the prevention of that. But that's only applicable once we reach adult age. And smoking it, my whole point is smoking it before your mid-20s is exponentially more dangerous to you, more damaging to the human body, and mostly the brain, and its final stages of development, the earlier you start. Now, I don't morally judge anybody that has, and obviously this is not a hard and fast line. I know a guy who started smoking cannabis when he was 9. And he's not an idiot. He's not a typical stoner. He is smart as a fucking whip and can outspeak anybody. I also know people that just started smoking cannabis in the last couple of years of their lives and are presenting the most idiotic, bumbling, kind of terrible, negative stereotype of what it is to be a cannabis consumer. I think there's two things going on there, folks. One is that stereotypes have a kernel of truth, but yet they also project themselves onto others. So I think for a long time, many people didn't know what it meant to behave, didn't know what it mean to be under the influence, didn't know how to behave under the influence of cannabis, and therefore they role modeled their behaviors. And blessed, I love Cheech Marin and what's his name, Chong, whatever his name is. Terrible. I'm not consuming cannabis. I just can't remember his name. I've always had this kind of funny memory. I know his name. It's Cheech Marin, and what's his name? Who goes by Chong, Cheech and Chong. Oh, forgive me, Cheech and Chong, if you're listening, if you ever listen to this. This has got nothing to do with cannabis. I used to be like this for years before I began. I didn't start smoking cannabis until I was 22 or 23, and as a youth. So there's lines of distinction that we shouldn't get confused. Regardless of my little rabbit hole there, these aren't hard and fast rules, but they are guidelines. And a smart, consensus-oriented guideline is, please don't start smoking it until, especially recreationally. Don't start using it recreationally, smoking it, consuming it recreationally. I don't like the term using it. But don't do it until you meet the minimum age imposed upon us by our own legislation, because at least then we'll know that you've done your due diligence and avoided the negative consequences of smoking it way too fucking soon. And yes, sure, there will be people who do it anyways, and they'll get away with it and won't experience any measurable negative consequences. But that doesn't prove the safety precaution wrong. They're just exceptions to the general norm, the general statistical trend. These are not hard and fast rules. The universe is a relativistic place. Everyone's going to have their own specific experience. But for sure, if you let and coming back to the parenting issue, I've known parents in the past who are so enamored with cannabis, and that they themselves grew up in a culture because of where they were and where their parents were at that time, where cannabis was allowed from whatever age they kind of wanted to, and that their exposure to cannabis began as who knows when, because their parents never segregated their smoking activities from their parenting activities. I don't think that that's wrong. I think that you can. I forget whose meme this is, but someone has a meme. And it's like some kind of trailer park themed show, like Trailer Park Boys or something. But I don't know what show it's in. And it's like clearly a popular meme. But I thought the message was interesting. And you can disagree with this, but I think that it is true. You don't have to stop drinking and stop smoking weed when you become a parent. You just have to be able to get up in the morning and have to fulfill all your responsibilities. I'll extend this. This is my extension. You have to be able to fulfill your parenting responsibilities at 100% safety and security. That's called being responsible, which means you won't get hammered. You'll enjoy some tasty adult beverages. That means you won't smoke 24 hours a day. You'll smoke when it makes a significant ceremonial, spiritual, psychological impact according to your needs and your tastes, and then you'll be responsible in the morning and get your kids to school on time. It's not that hard, folks. But one of the things that's easy to overlook is secondhand smoke. I've seen this. I've witnessed it personally. I don't judge it morally, but as a person who's advocating for a deeper conversation, for a more well thought out cannabis culture, I say that as we move forward, we need to help each other avoid these kinds of things, these kinds of problems. Don't smoke around your kid, man, especially your little ones. It's so easy to just create the space and the time so you can continue to smoke and your kid's not in the room. Okay. So what else? Hypocrisies. We got to avoid hypocrisies, right? We got to be well informed. We got to not. If we just prohibit children without any clear understanding, without this transparency, without the communication, they're gonna rebel, folks. Let's be honest. Raise your hands, my fellow human beings. How many of you had your first drink because you got sick and tired of the hypocrisy in your parents drinking and telling you not to drink? I bet it's more common than most people care to recognize. All right. Simultaneously, we need to, I propose, I humbly suggest that we need to conduct more scientific research, not just at the overall level, but specifically around kids. And that gets a little tricky. How do you do research on that? But there's ways to work around those kinds of limitations. But we need more concrete data. I've brought forth the suggestion that I feel strongly, I could be wrong, but it seems to make a lot of sense to me. I think that cannabis is the opposite of what alcohol is. Alcohol is a toxic substance that when we consume it does immediate short-term and slow progressive long-term damage to the body, and that in between those two extremes, our body is giving us warning signals about that substance being toxic, and that this is what we call being drunk, and that somehow or another, I don't know, maybe because all alcohol industry is a profiteering industry, we've been bullied or brainwashed into believing that this is fun, that this is awesome, that this is what freedom is, that this is what courage means, that this is what being a man is. Loads of horseshit. Cannabis, very much like meditation, my friends, has no, at this point, and in the past, cannabis in and of itself has no profiteering motive. Now, let's not conflate things. We are on the verge, my fellow cannabis enthusiasts, and those of you listening who are not cannabis enthusiasts, this is important to you too. We are on the verge of a struggle to prevent or avoid the following issue. The cannabis industry is going to grow too big for its britches, and it's going to begin to increasingly resemble the alcohol or tobacco industry. As a matter of fact, the tobacco industry has been, for quite some time, positioned to invade the cannabis industry should it ever win the momentum to become decriminalized. And I know that's counterintuitive because the tobacco industry, the cigarette industry, has been a big proponent of trying, spending money and effort and social capital to keep cannabis illegal. Because, I'll tell you what, as a former smoker of cigarettes, I'd rather smoke cannabis all day than a pack of cigarettes a day. 100%, hands down. Now, am I going to smoke some heavy, like, high percentage THC thing all day? No. I don't want to sit and drool on myself and only be capable of... Sometimes you need that. And guess what, folks? That effect, that really, like, couch lock effect, the the melting into the floor thing that everyone's so fun of, that's got a purpose. And it's bigger and larger than just sitting there like an idiot or watching movies. It's fine to just sit there like an idiot, watch a movie. Nothing wrong with that. But now think about meditation and what meditation is. Meditation is more than just sitting there doing nothing, but the biggest obstacle to people engaging in meditation is the fact that sitting there and doing absolutely nothing is really hard. Ding, 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 ding. 4:20 minutes left. 4 minutes and 20 seconds left. So as you can see, I'm trying to connect all these dots through this word cloud of me spewing things at you. But I'm going to wrap it up here because we're almost out of time, and just invite you to consider that. So obviously, there's a lot more to discuss, and there's deeper levels to all of this. But I hope that you'll take a few. I hope that these words, my words, however mealy mouth I've been today, I hope that they've had an impact, and then you walk away with some, deep thoughts about it. And then you come back at me with some questions, remarks, commentary. You can always reach me at theincorrigiblemrzeppo@gmail.com. The link should be part of the podcast page, wherever you're getting your podcast, wherever you're catching this podcast on, should be there. And if not, you can always just type in Mr. Zeppo on either Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and find me there. So yeah, folks, cannabis. It's not the evil gateway drug that the propagandists against it have been trying to brainwash us into believing. Clearly, a lot of people have realized that, or else we wouldn't have had this groundswell movement, this grassroots movement, this cannabis roots movement. Ooh, new hashtag cannabis roots movement. I'll write that down. But it's also not, it's not to be conflated or confused with narcotics. It's not a narcotic. Cannabis root, grassroots, it's plural, right? Cannabis roots movement. Hashtag cannabis matters. Okay, folks, I'm at the end of the segment allotted time for today. And for listening and tuning in, I thank you. This has been your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And this has been another episode of Cannabis Talk, the Daily Nugget. If you're smoking today, enjoy. If you're not smoking today, enjoy. And keep in mind, there's a relationship between those two modalities that is worth exploring. Be sure to check out my other podcast segment series. And be sure to tune in for more Cannabis Talk. May peace, love, and grooviness be with you, folks.